Well, it's about time. One of the things about this special Senate election in Alabama that's gotten on my nerves for a while now is that it seemed to be taking so damn long for the actual election day to arrive. So I'm glad that it's finally come and gone already. Lord have mercy. As for the outcome, I have to say, I was surprised. I did not see this outcome coming. I was sure that Alabamans were going to stay true to type, even in light of all these sexual assault allegations made against Roy Moore. I mean, if there's one thing that we've learned in the past year or two, maybe 3 years tops, it's that the hardcore Republican base, hardcore Republican voters, for them, issues like sexual assault are just not a priority. At least not unless the person being accused of sexual assault or sexual harassment or any kind of sexual misconduct happens to be a liberal Democrat, like, say, Bill Clinton. But when it's one of their own who's under fire, forget about it. All bets are off. So I didn't see this coming. I'm glad. But I think there's a bigger issue at play here. One thing that we kept hearing in the dying days of the campaign leading up to the special election is Republicans at the national level bemoaning the Roy Moore phenomenon because of what an albatross it would be around Republicans' necks at the national level. What a political liability it'll be for them going into next year's midterm congressional elections. Now, from what I remember reading a year ago, the electoral map technically favors Republicans, favors their continued control of the Senate. But even so, Republicans are quaking in their boots after the past year of dysfunction and just effery, to put it mildly, in Washington under Trump. They're not feeling too strong going into next year. Now, they say a year is an eternity in politics. Anything could happen in the next year, but honestly, what are the odds that Trump is going to fix his ways, clean up his act, and somehow learn how to act right in the course of the next year? But what I particularly hear about Republicans at the national level is that they're worried about the threat from within. They're worried about the threat of being primaried, as they put it. Hardcore pro-Trump right-wingers are going to be challenging them in primary election after primary election. Just like what was done to Eric Cantor a few years ago, and like what was done on the Democratic side to Joe Lieberman more than a decade ago over the Iraq War. Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's nasty, bigoted, racist, evil, creepy crony, already threatened 2 months ago to primary almost every Republican candidate who is going to be up for election next year in November 2018.
There's a time and season for everything. And right now, it's a season of war against a GOP establishment. This is not my war. This is our war. And you all didn't start it. The establishment started it. But I will tell you one thing. You all are going to finish it.
So it seems a lot of Republicans at the national level are shaking in their boots. My message to them is this. If you guys really do have a halfway decent bone in your bodies, if you really have any kind of morality or integrity or courage at all, you'll accept that challenge from the likes of Steve Bannon. What is this phenomenon of politicians in Washington being so terrified of being primaried nowadays? I mean, I know it often doesn't go their way. You've got someone like Eric Cantor who went down to, what was this challenger's name again? Oh yes, Dave Brat, if I remember correctly. I think I was still living in Washington when that happened. The mere threat of being primaried is enough to just scare so many Republicans stiff and scare them into submission. But if they really want to hold on to their party and prevent it from going any further down the rat hole down which Trump has led it so far, they've got to grow some balls, quite frankly. They need to grow some cojones and stand up to these challenges. What is a primary? It's really just a message that even incumbent politicians are not entitled to their seats, more specifically to their party's respective nominations. And guess what? They're not. I don't agree with the viewpoints of these primary challenges, of course not. But that's beside the point. The point is, even if you get primaried, deal with it. Face up to it. Fight. I mean, since when are so many of these Republicans at the national level, the ones who are halfway decent, the ones who agree on certain norms of basic morality and decency and opposition to rank bigotry, since when are so many of them so damn cowardly, man? So they want to primary you. You'll spend most of your time fundraising anyway. That's a general phenomenon among legislators in American politics, particularly at the national level, particularly in Congress. So, fundraise some more, reach out to your grassroots, and get out there and make a case. Yes, a lot of Republican voters are angry these days. Lord knows Trump's election last year proved that. But think about it. Let's not forget Donald Trump himself won last year in spite of majority public opinion in the United States, not because of it. After all, he lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton, and that's just Trump. Now look at what's happened in some cases in the past when politicians in Washington, particularly in the Senate, were primaried. Back in 2006, a lot of Democrats were so furious with Joe Lieberman over his support for the Iraq War that they primaried him. And guess what? They won the battle because they succeeded in denying him the Democratic nomination for that Senate seat out of Connecticut. So what did Lieberman do? Did he say, oh dear, my party's denied me the nomination, I guess I gotta go home and cry now? Nope. He ran as an independent and he won. It turned out that the general electorate in Connecticut, the voters of Connecticut in general, actually were satisfied with the job that Joe Lieberman had been doing of representing them at the national level. So although hardcore liberal Democrats in Connecticut were furious with Lieberman for supporting the war, folks in Connecticut, I don't even know what the demonym for Connecticut is. What do you call someone from Connecticut? I have no clue, but people in Connecticut, voters in Connecticut in general, were satisfied enough with Lieberman that they turned out to the polls to support him as an independent candidate in November of 2006, and they gave him the win. He beat back his primary challenger. The challenger won the battle, but lost the war. Now, there's no guarantee that Republican senators who pull a similar maneuver would necessarily win out in the end. But at the same time, you got someone like Bannon coming after you. You're going to allow that to intimidate you into accepting that your party be twisted into this pretzel that accepts and even glorifies bigotry of all kinds, Islamophobia, nativism, racism of various kinds, homophobia. So many of the very worst things about America, as I've been saying since I was a youngster. Bannon saying he wants to make sure almost all of y'all get primary. Fine. If I were one of these Republican senators, I know it wouldn't be easy, but I would tell Bannon, bring it on. I'm not scared of you. You think I'm gonna back down or turn myself around because you threatened me with being primaried? I'll accept the challenge. I relish the challenge. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna fight. That's what these Republican senators need to do. Instead of letting the threat of being primary intimidate them like they've been doing for years now, ever since the Tea Party took shape, they need to start standing up for what they themselves, many of them at least, know and believe to be right. Now, the Republican Party has had a problem with playing the politics of bigotry for at least 50 years now. But even so, the highest ranking among them, the folks in the so-called establishment, the hated Republican establishment, they at least seem to know right from wrong when it comes to certain basic questions, such as, should we be insinuating that Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States, or that he's a Muslim or an Arab?
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not.
No, ma'am. He's a decent, family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues, and that's what this campaign is all about. He's not. Thank you.
Claiming a person can't do their job because of their race is sort of like the textbook definition of a racist comment. I think that should be absolutely disavowed.
It's time to quit attacking various people that you competed with or various minority groups in the country.
Things of that nature. The Republican Party in recent years, and I mean just the past several years, has been backing down in the face of this bigotry and accepting it, and failing to challenge it the way they used to challenge it even just as recently as 5 years ago. That's what needs to end. And to the extent that the threat of being primaried is driving them in this direction, they need to stand up to that threat for once. So this is my advice to Republicans at the national level. Those of you who are quaking in your socks at the threat of being primaried, fight. Fight. Don't just take this nonsense lying down. Bannon and his cronies, the Breitbart crowd, they want to primary you, then fight. Yes, at least some of you will probably lose. Some of you will probably go down in flames. Fair enough. At least you won't go out like punks, wimps, cowards. At least you'll have gone out with some honor.
I was supposed to die in the field with honor.
At least you'll have gone down fighting. Suck it up. Stop being intimidated. Stop being backed down. Stop being painted into a corner. When Bannon and his cronies come for you, instead of trembling in fear of the dreaded Republican base, put your hands up and fight.